Folks, Kamala Harris's interview with Fox News was explosive. It was a very explosive interview which lasted 26 minutes, which had a lot of things in it that we will discuss today. We will talk about Kamala Harris's interview with Brett, and it has been an interesting one, certainly. They talked about immigration, they talked about Trump. I think that, people have been saying this is a train wreck, and after the interview, Kamala actually plummeted even further in the polling market. She lost another 2% of chance of winning, which is true. However, I actually don't think that it was as bad as it could have been, and I'll tell you why. Not because I'm a Kamala fan, but because we know very well that Kamala Harris at the interview is not good. That's her weakness. She's proved that, and she's never been great at interviews. I think she's capable of debating. I think that she's a good debater. She can debate well, but when it comes to interviews, she's just terrible. She can't do great interviews. She's shown that, and we've seen that already. So we didn't have very high expectations because of how low she set the bar in regards to interviews. But, we could call it a train wreck because it wasn't great. But actually, before that we dive into what's happened throughout the interview, this is going to be shorter than the other ones. I would actually like to talk about why Kamala's strategy has changed. Because if we think about 1 month ago, she wasn't giving any interview whatsoever. She wasn't giving interviews. She was basically hiding in the basement. She was doing the same thing that Biden did in 2020. The problem is that in 2020, Biden had an excuse, we could say, because there was COVID. So with the restrictions, it was more difficult to organize rallies. It was more difficult to organize stuff. It was maybe less appropriate to some degree. I don't know for what reason. But now in 2024, COVID is gone. There is no COVID, or well, it still exists, but nobody cares about it anymore. I wonder why. And she basically hid for 1 month when she was still in the honeymoon. And then after the honeymoon came to an end, she was still hiding. Then the debate came, which gave her a 2 weeks boost, but now she's coming out. Because she, I think, is saying that she's losing. She must have analyzed, or at least, well, not her in particular, but her team must have analyzed and come to the conclusion that she's losing in internal polls. Therefore, she has to try to appeal to voters. And that's why we see Barack Obama on the campaign trail, in order to gain back black voters. And that's why they are bringing Obama in the campaign trail. I think it's clear to me that's one of the cards that they were thinking about, and Obama is back. But to be honest, I don't know how much impact that will have. Obama is has certainly been the most influential Democrat since Clinton, I would say. And, he can bring some voters to Kamala, but what can he do other than that? Now, guys, let's go into the interview because that's interesting. So let's start by talking about immigration. I'll play you some clips probably because I want to give you context. So they started talking about immigration, and Brett actually asked Kamala, for a specific number of how many illegals crossed the southern border since she became vice president and since she became the appointed border czar. Kamala, of course, kind of dodged the question. She didn't give an answer. She wanted to go on I wouldn't call it a rant, but she wanted to go on a rant, let's just use this word, to make it easier, about how immigration has always been a problem, and all of that stuff. But she was questioning about immigration. Guys, I will play the clip. I will play you Kamala's initial answer to Brett's first question. I will play you that part of the interview to make you understand what we're talking about here and what we're dealing with here.
How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have. And you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but
right now,
just a number. Do you think it's 1 million, 3 million?
Brett, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your
And-
Homeland Security Secretary said that 85%
Well, no,
of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have an
It's a rough
immigration
estimate of
system
6 million people
that
have been
needs to be-
released into the country.
So as you saw, that's the answer that Kamala gave, and she kind of dodged it. That's a typical behavior that we can see from politicians. But regardless of that, I want to actually jump into, there has been another, Brett brought up 3, I think, young girls who have been killed by some illegal immigrants. And Kamala, Brett asked whether she owed an apology to them, and Kamala didn't answer the question directly, and that's for political purposes. I don't think that she didn't apologize because she's such a nasty person. I think that she didn't apologize directly for political purposes, because if she had apologized, that would have highlighted the fact that her border policies have not been successful, which happens to be true. I'm not saying it isn't true, but that politically would have been bad. So that's the reason why she hasn't directly apologized. She's just said that she is sorry and she feels awful about that.
But more importantly, back to the original premise, Jocelyn Nungari, Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before a negotiated bipartisan bill. Former President Clinton actually referred to Laken Riley Sunday, campaigning for you in Georgia, saying if those men had been properly vetted, Laken Riley probably would not have been killed. So if it wouldn't have happened, this is well before any negotiation. This is well before Donald Trump got involved in the politics. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe
Brett,
those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that. There is no question about that. And I can't imagine the pain that the families of those victims have experienced for a loss that should not have occurred.
Because of the Biden-Harris administration open border policies catch and release, they were enrolled in the Alternatives to Detention program. This meant that they were released into the United States. It was not even a full 3 weeks later that they would take my daughter, Jocelyn Nungari's life. I believe the Biden-Harris administration open border policies are responsible for the death of my daughter.
That's the early days. So do you owe them an apology is what I'm saying.
I will tell you that I am so sorry for her loss. I am so sorry for her loss. Sincerely.
But, this brings me back to a clip I watched about J.D. Vance, where he was debating, unless I'm mistaken, some Republican, I don't know which debate it was, but he was debating somebody, and, the other guy was trying to lecture him about illegal immigration. No, it was about abortion. He was saying, there has been this woman who has been assaulted who couldn't have an abortion because of Trump abortion bans or stuff like that. That was the kind of argument the other guy was trying to, come up with. And then J.D. Vance actually obliterated him because that was a homicide on national TV. That should be charged with assassination because that was genuinely homicide. And J.D. Vance said it is Kamala's or it is the Democrats' fault because they are allowing illegals to come in and they are committing crimes. With my policies, no illegals would have come in. Therefore, that person could not have been raped. And that's, guys, a very great answer. And regarding that, Kamala Harris was, she was questioned. Brett asked her about her policies on immigration. She has strengthened her policies on immigration since 2019. She's flip-flopped on many issues, but one thing which we saw is that Kamala Harris has strengthened her position on immigration. She was asked about transgender operations upon illegal aliens in jails, unless I'm mistaken, and she was asked whether such operations would be funded by taxpayers' money, and she kind of dodged it. She dodged it. She didn't kind of dodged it. She dodged it. She said that
this particular one from the Trump campaign has gotten a lot of attention.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
So are you still in support of using taxpayer dollars to help prison inmates or detained illegal aliens to transition to another gender?
I will follow the law, and it's a law that Donald Trump actually followed.
She's gonna follow the law, and she said that so did Trump, so she kind of avoided it to some degree, we could say, but she was questioned about immigration. By the way, let me talk about the interview. I think that Brett did a good job. I don't think he did a bad job. And if there are Democrats complaining about how Kamala was treated by, Fox News, which is the most famous news outlet that's Republican, I mean, there is nothing to complain about because Trump has gone on CNN, ABC, all of those news outlets, and he's been treated as strongly as Kamala's been treated. So I think it's fair. I will be honest, I'm going to use a coarse word. Brett was an asshole at times, but so have been reporters with Trump. So I think it's all fair. So that's what I believe. The last thing about immigration, Kamala Harris has said that she will not decriminalize crossing the border illegally. Therefore, if she becomes president, she will not decriminalize it. It will still be a crime, and she has said that she hasn't decriminalized it as VP, and she won't do that as president either. So that's another thing she said.
So decriminalizing border crossings, like you said in 2019.
I do not believe in decriminalizing border crossings, and I've not done that as vice president. I will not do that as president.
So these are evolutions that you've had.
So then they started talking about turning the page, and they started talking about Trump, the rhetoric, and a new way forward. We're not going back, all of those kind of things. And actually, as we know, Kamala Harris on a show a couple of days ago has said that she said that there is nothing which comes to mind that she would do differently from Biden in the administration that she has been the vice president in. And she also said a couple of days later in another show that she's not Donald Trump and she's not Biden. So she said that she's a different person. And rightfully, I would say the reporter, the journalist, asked her what would she do differently and what would she turn the page from. Now I'm going to play you the answer she's given to make you understand a couple of things, and then I'll comment on it and I'll comment on this whole section of the interview.
It's interesting you said turn the page, Madam Vice President. You were asked on 2 different shows last week what, if anything, you would do differently than President Biden. Here's what you said.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
Under a Harris administration, what would the major changes be, and what would stay the same?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm obviously not Joe Biden.
I know.
And so that would be one change in terms of, but also I think it's important to say with, 28 days to go, I'm not Donald Trump.
So you're not Joe Biden, you're not Donald Trump, but nothing comes to mind that you would do differently?
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency.
Your campaign slogan is a new way forward, and it's time to turn the page. You've been vice president for 3.5 years. So what are you turning the page from?
Well, first of all, turning the page from the last decade in which we have been burdened with the kind of rhetoric coming from Donald Trump that has been designed and implemented to divide our country and have Americans literally point fingers at each other. Rhetoric and an approach to leadership that suggests that the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down instead of what we all know. The strength of leadership is based on who you lift up. The strength of an American president, which is one who understands that the vast majority of us have more in common than what separates us.
Madam Vice President, more than 70% of people
that is
tell
about
pollsters,
turning the page on rhetoric that people are frankly exhausted of, Brett.
More than 70% of people tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, That track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you?
So Kamala said that her presidency won't be the continuation of Biden's presidency, and she's been doing this. She's been basically distancing herself from Biden, because if she had, if she had not distanced herself from Biden, it wouldn't have been great in terms of campaigning and all those sorts of things. It wouldn't have been a wise moves in terms of strategy. So that's the reason why she's been trying to distance herself from Biden, even though she's been with Biden. So we could argue it's kind of disingenuous, but politicians are disingenuous, so it's nothing new, to say the least. But she, when asked about turning the page, she has talked about how in the last decade there has been Trump's rhetoric and how Americans are exhausted and tired of it. And she's basically trying to say that it's all Trump's fault and Trump's rhetoric. And she's dodging the part regarding her vice presidency and all those kind of things, and regarding her administration. So she's basically dodging it, and I'm not blaming her for that, because every politician does that. Trump has done that, Biden has done that, Obama has done that, and so have all the other politicians, and so have all the politicians which have ever existed. So I'm not gonna blame her for dodging the question in that kind of manner, but she talked about Trump's rhetoric, she talked about that, she talked about the fact that Trump diminishes people, and she talked about that sort of thing, and she talked about how Trump diminishes people and how she doesn't on the other hand. But she has struggled in that part when it comes to distancing herself. At a certain point, the journalist Brett brought up a statistic that says that 79% of Americans actually believes that the country is not on the right track. And Kamala said basically Trump has been running for office, and she said something on a political clip like, you know what I'm talking about, and Brett then rightfully says, I don't know what you're talking about, you've been vice president for the last 4 years.
Brett,
More than
people
70% of people tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't.
So that's the clip, guys. And then the last thing they talked about, Kamala was asked about Biden's mental decline, and she's basically said that Biden is still competent. She has not talked about Biden's decline. She's basically dodged the question. They were wrapping it up. Brett was forced to wrap it up in the last minutes because he was pressured by, I think, Kamala's team. And then she was asked about Iran. And when it comes to Iran, Kamala said, that Iran is the biggest threat to the US. And she said basically that she doesn't want Iran to have nukes. That's what she said. And she thinks that Israel has a right to defend itself and all those sorts of things. Guys, let me know what you think about Kamala's interview with Fox News. I think that she's struggling in terms of campaign. I think that she's losing. I think that she's losing points in the polls because she wouldn't go into the lion's den if she weren't losing, or at least if she weren't losing points. Now, thank you very much, and see you in the next videos talking about the election. It's been very nice.